I'm 73 years old and I'm working night shifts at a Walmart distribution center in Nevada. Let me say that again so it sinks in. 73. Night shifts. I should be on a beach somewhere watching sunsets. Instead, I'm unloading pallets at 2 in the morning because a 28-year-old hotel receptionist in Thailand stole my entire pension and I was too stupid to see it happening. $730,000. Gone. That's not an estimate. That's the exact figure I calculated sitting in a police station in Hua Hin with a Thai lawyer who kept saying the same thing over and over. Very difficult. Very difficult. Everything I'd saved over 37 years with the United States Postal Service, every overtime shift, every holiday I worked instead of spending time with my kids, every penny I'd put away thinking I was building security for my old age, all of it transferred to an account in Singapore that I didn't know existed until it was empty. People ask me how it happened. They want to understand the mechanics of it, like if they can identify the specific mistake I made, they can avoid it themselves. But that's not how it works. It wasn't one mistake. It was 1,000 small decisions that all made perfect sense at the time, strung together over 18 months until I woke up one day and realized I'd given a woman I barely knew complete control over everything I owned. I retired from the Postal Service in March of 2019. 37 years of delivering mail in Carson City, through snow and heat and everything in between. I was 56 when I started. You do the math. I'd been married twice. Both marriages failed for the same reason. I worked too much. My first wife, Linda, left me in 1991. My second wife, Patricia, made it until 2003 before she'd had enough. I have 3 kids from those marriages. We're not close. That's my fault, not theirs. I chose work over family every single time because I thought providing money was the same thing as being present. By the time I retired, I had exactly $755,000 in my combined retirement accounts. My pension was structured to pay out $4,200 per month for the rest of my life. I owned my house in Carson City outright, worth maybe $180,000. On paper, I was set, comfortable, not rich, but secure. I could live modestly and never worry about money again. That was the plan. The first 6 months of retirement nearly killed me. I'm not being dramatic. I woke up every day at 5 in the morning out of habit, and then I had nothing to do. I'd already alienated my kids with years of absence. I had work friends, but those relationships didn't survive beyond the retirement party. I'd spent 37 years defining myself by what I did, and suddenly I didn't do anything. I was just Howard. And Howard, alone in a paid-off house in Carson City, was discovering that he didn't particularly like his own company. I started watching YouTube videos about retirement destinations: Vietnam, Portugal, Mexico, Ecuador, places where the cost of living was low and where an American pension went further. That's how I found Thailand. There were hundreds of channels, guys my age, older, younger, all talking about how they'd moved to Thailand and their lives had completely transformed. Beautiful weather, cheap living, friendly people, and women. That was always part of the sales pitch, though they tried to be subtle about it. These men had found companionship, partnership, love, whatever word made it sound less pathetic. The subtext was always the same. You can start over here. I watched those videos for months. I told myself I was just researching options, being thorough, doing my due diligence. But really I was feeding a fantasy. The fantasy that I could leave behind everything I'd failed at in America and become someone different somewhere else. Someone who had relationships that mattered. Someone who wasn't just marking time until death. Thailand offered me permission to believe I could be that person. I booked a 2-week trip in November 2019. Just to look around, I told myself. No commitments. I flew into Bangkok and immediately took a bus down to Hua Hin because one of the YouTube channels I followed said it was quieter than Pattaya, more upscale, better for retirees who wanted peace rather than chaos. The bus ride took about 3 hours. I remember staring out the window at the landscape changing from urban sprawl to rural farmland to coastal resort town and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Like my life wasn't finished yet. I checked into a mid-range hotel on the beach. Nothing fancy, but clean, with a balcony overlooking the Gulf of Thailand. The rate was $35 per night. In Carson City, that would get you a room at a highway motel with cigarette burns in the carpet. Here, I had ocean views and breakfast included. The math was already working in Thailand's favor. Apinya worked at the hotel reception desk. She was there when I checked in that first afternoon. Late 20s, I guessed, though I'm terrible at estimating ages. She had that professional hospitality smile that made you feel welcome without being overly familiar. She spoke English well, better than most of the staff. When she handed me my room key, she asked if this was my first time in Hua Hin. I said yes, first time in Thailand. She said if I needed any recommendations for restaurants or activities, I should ask her. She knew all the good places, the ones locals went to, not the tourist traps. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was doing her job, being helpful, creating a good customer experience. But over the next few days, I kept finding reasons to stop by the reception desk. I'd ask about where to get dinner, which beach was best for swimming, whether I needed to book a tour in advance or could just show up. She always had answers. She always had time to talk, even when the desk was busy, and she always seemed genuinely interested in making sure I was having a good experience. On the fourth day, she asked if I'd tried the night market yet. I hadn't. She said it was the best place to experience authentic Thai food and culture, but it could be overwhelming for first-time visitors who didn't know what to order or how to navigate the crowds. She offered to take me there after her shift ended at 6. As friends, she clarified, just to help me experience the real Hua Hin. I should have recognized that offer for what it was, a transaction beginning. But I didn't. I was a 71-year-old man who'd been divorced twice and hadn't been on anything resembling a date in over a decade. A beautiful woman half my age was offering to spend her free time showing me around her city. I didn't ask myself why. I didn't question her motives. I just felt grateful that someone wanted my company. The night market was exactly as chaotic as she'd warned. Vendors selling everything from grilled seafood to knockoff designer bags. Crowds of tourists and locals pushing through narrow aisles. The smell of frying garlic and fish sauce and incense all mixing together. Apinya navigated it like she owned the place. She'd stop at stalls and order food in Thai, then explain to me what I was eating. Grilled squid with chili sauce, mango sticky rice, some kind of pork skewer that was sweet and savory at the same time. She paid for everything before I could object. When I tried to reimburse her, she waved me off. This was her treat, she said. Welcome to Thailand. We walked along the beach after the market. The conversation shifted from food and tourism to personal things. She asked about my life in America, what I did before I retired, whether I had family. I told her about the Postal Service, about my failed marriages, about my kids who I wasn't close to. I probably shared too much too fast, but it had been so long since anyone asked about my life with genuine curiosity. She listened without judgment. She asked follow-up questions. She made me feel heard. She told me about her own life. She'd grown up in a village about an hour outside Hua Hin. Her father had died when she was 12. Her mother still lived in the village, trying to maintain the family's small rice farm with Apinya's younger brother. It was hard work and didn't pay well. Apinya had come to Hua Hin at 18 to find work, sending money back home every month to help support her mother and brother. She'd worked her way up from housekeeping to reception at the hotel. She was proud of what she'd accomplished, but she was also tired. Tired of working 6 days a week. Tired of living in a small apartment with 2 other hotel workers. Tired of watching wealthy foreigners come through the hotel for 2-week holidays while she scraped by month to month. I asked her why she was telling me all this. She said because I seemed like someone who understood what it meant to work hard your whole life. Someone who knew that money wasn't everything, but that not having enough money made everything harder. She said most of the guests at the hotel treated the staff like servants or scenery. But I'd been different from the start. I'd looked her in the eye. I'd said please and thank you. Small things, she said, but they mattered. That night, walking back to the hotel, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Connection. Not romantic necessarily, though I won't pretend the thought didn't cross my mind, but just human connection. Someone seeing me as a person rather than a customer or a paycheck or a disappointment. It sounds pathetic written out like this. I know that, a lonely old man getting played by a hotel receptionist with a sob story. But when you're living it, when you're the one who's been isolated and invisible for years, that attention feels like sunlight after a long winter. My 2-week trip stretched into 3 weeks, then a month. I moved out of the hotel and into a small rental apartment near the beach. Apinya helped me find it through a friend of a friend. The rent was 12,000 baht per month, about $380. That included utilities and internet. I was paying more than that for just the utilities on my house back in Carson City. The economics of staying in Thailand were becoming impossible to ignore. Apinya and I saw each other almost every day. She'd finish her shift at the hotel and come to my apartment. We'd cook dinner together, or go out to local restaurants she knew. She taught me basic Thai phrases, how to order food, how to say hello and thank you, how to count. She was patient with my terrible pronunciation, laughing in a way that felt affectionate rather than mocking. On her days off, we'd take day trips to nearby beaches or temples or markets in other towns. The first time she mentioned her family's financial problems was about 6 weeks into our friendship. We were having dinner at my apartment. I'd made spaghetti, one of the maybe 3 dishes I could cook competently. She'd been quiet all evening, which wasn't like her. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, then said her mother had called earlier that day. The rice harvest had been poor this year because of irregular rainfall. Her mother was behind on payments for a loan she'd taken out to buy a water pump for irrigation. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the land if the payment wasn't made by the end of the month. I asked how much the payment was. She said 80,000 baht. I did the math in my head, about $2,500 for a water pump loan payment. It seemed like such a small amount to potentially lose your family's land over. I said I could help with that. She immediately refused. She said she wasn't telling me to ask for money. She was just explaining why she was distracted, why she was worried. I said I understood that, but I had the money and it wasn't a big deal for me. To me, $2,500 was a rounding error. To her family, it was the difference between survival and losing everything. She cried. She said she couldn't accept that kind of generosity from me. We'd only known each other a short time. I barely knew her family. It wouldn't be right, I insisted. I said I wanted to help. I said I had more money than I needed, and what was the point of having it if I couldn't use it to help people I cared about? That was the first time I'd acknowledged out loud that I cared about her. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, or relief, or something else I didn't recognize. The next day, we went to the bank together. She helped me set up a Thai bank account so I could transfer money locally without the fees and hassle of international wire transfers. It made sense, practically speaking. If I was going to be spending time in Thailand, I'd need a way to access my money easily. I transferred $10,000 from my US account as a starting balance. Then I transferred 80,000 baht to Apinya so she could pay her mother's loan. She showed me the receipt from her mother's bank confirming the payment had been made. Her mother called her that evening while we were together. I couldn't understand the conversation because it was in Thai, but I could hear the emotion in her mother's voice. Apinya was crying again when she hung up. She hugged me and said I'd saved her family. I'd given them hope when they had none. It felt good. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt like I'd done something that mattered, something that had real impact on real people's lives. Back in Carson City, I was just another retiree killing time. Here, I was someone's hero. I was the person who'd stepped in when everything was falling apart and made it right. That feeling was intoxicating. 3 weeks later, Apinya's brother got into a motorcycle accident. Nothing life-threatening, but he'd broken his leg and needed surgery. The government hospital would do it for free, but the wait was 6 weeks and he'd be in pain the whole time. The private hospital could do it within days, but it cost 150,000 baht, about $4,700. She didn't ask me directly. She just told me what had happened, showed me pictures of her brother in the hospital with his leg in a temporary splint, explained the situation. I offered to pay for it before she could finish explaining. She went through the same ritual of refusing, saying it was too much, saying she couldn't accept. I insisted again. We went to the bank again. I transferred the money. Her brother had the surgery. He recovered. Apinya's mother called to thank me personally, speaking through Apinya as a translator. She said I was a good man, a kind man, and that her daughter was lucky to have me in her life. I asked Apinya what exactly her mother meant by that. Were we together? Was that how Apinya had described our relationship to her family? She said she didn't know how to define what we were. We weren't just friends. We spent almost every day together. We cared about each other. But she didn't want to assume anything about what I wanted. She was younger. She was Thai. She understood that men like me sometimes just wanted companionship without commitment. She didn't want to pressure me into something I wasn't ready for. I was 71 years old. I'd been alone for 16 years. I'd spent the last 4 months in Thailand feeling more alive than I had in decades. And now this beautiful, kind, grateful woman was telling me she didn't want to pressure me. It felt absurd. I was the one who should be worried about pressuring her. I was the one who was too old, too boring, too damaged from failed relationships, but she was presenting it like she was the one who needed to prove her worth. I told her I wanted to be with her. Officially. As a couple. I said I knew the age difference was significant, and I knew people might judge us for it, but I didn't care. She made me happy. She made me feel like my life had purpose again. If she felt the same way about me, then nothing else mattered. She said she did feel the same way. She said she'd been hoping I'd say something like that, but didn't want to be the first to bring it up. We made it official that night. Boyfriend and girlfriend. Though those words felt ridiculous at my age. But that's what we were. A couple. Committed to each other. The next morning, she was looking at apartments online. She said if we were going to be together seriously, we should live together. Her current apartment was too small and too far from the beach. She'd found a nice 2-bedroom condo closer to the water, modern building, good security, 25,000 baht per month, about $780. She'd pay half, she said. I said that was ridiculous. She made maybe 15,000 baht per month at the hotel. There was no way she could afford half of that rent. I'd cover the rent. She could contribute to groceries and utilities if she wanted to feel like she was paying her share. We moved into the condo in January 2020, right around the time news about a virus in China was starting to make international headlines, though none of us knew yet how much that was going to change everything. The condo was beautiful, fully furnished, modern kitchen, balcony with an ocean view. Living there felt like living in a resort. Apinya quit her job at the hotel. She said it didn't make sense for her to work those long hours anymore when we were building a life together. She wanted to focus on taking care of our home, learning to cook Western food I'd like, improving her English. I didn't argue. I was retired. She was essentially retired. We could be retired together. By March 2020, Thailand went into lockdown because of COVID. I couldn't leave the country even if I wanted to. My visa was set to expire in April. Apinya helped me navigate the extension process. We went to immigration together. The officer asked about our relationship. Apinya explained we were living together, planning to get married eventually. The officer seemed satisfied. I got a 60-day extension. Then another. The rules kept changing week by week as the Thai government tried to figure out what to do with all the foreigners who were stuck in the country. During the lockdown, Apinya's family started having more problems. The pandemic had destroyed the market for rice. Prices had crashed. Her mother couldn't sell the harvest for enough to cover basic expenses. Her brother still couldn't work because his leg hadn't healed properly. The family needed help. 50,000 baht, then 75,000 baht, then 100,000 baht. Each time, there was a crisis, a medical emergency, a debt coming due, something breaking that needed replacement. Each time, I transferred the money. What else was I going to do? I was living with Apinya. Her family was effectively my family now. You take care of family. In June 2020, Apinya said we should get married, not just for the visa, though that would solve my immigration problems permanently, but because we loved each other and we were already building a life together. Why wait? We weren't getting any younger, she joked. She was 27. I was 71. The age gap was 44 years. But she said it didn't matter to her. Age was just a number. What mattered was how we treated each other, how we made each other feel. And I made her feel safe, secure, loved, protected. All the things her father would have provided if he hadn't died when she was 12. We got married at the district office in Hua Hin in July 2020. Small ceremony. Just us and 2 witnesses we pulled in from the office. Apinya wore a white dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. I wore the nicest polo shirt I owned. We signed the papers, paid the fees. We were married, legally, officially. I was someone's husband again for the 3rd time. I told myself this time would be different because I wasn't working anymore. I could be present. I could be the husband I'd failed to be twice before. After the wedding, Apinya said we should buy a house. Renting was throwing money away, she said. If we bought a house, we'd be building equity. It would be an investment. Plus, her mother was getting older and struggling to maintain the family land. If we bought a house with enough space, her mother could come live with us, and we could take care of her properly. It was the Thai way, she explained. Children take care of their parents in old age. It would be disrespectful not to. I said I couldn't own land in Thailand as a foreigner. She said she knew that. The house would have to be in her name. But we were married now. What was hers was ours, and what was mine was ours. It was just a legal technicality, the name on the deed. The house would be our house, our home together. We looked at properties for a month. We found a nice house about 20 minutes outside Hua Hin. 3 bedrooms, Western-style kitchen, small garden. The asking price was 5.8 million baht, about $180,000. I had more than that in my retirement accounts. I transferred $200,000 to my Thai bank account to cover the house and closing costs. The deed went in Apinya's name. We moved in September 2020. Her mother moved in 2 weeks later. Then her brother moved in because he still wasn't working and needed a place to stay while he figured things out. Apinya said it was temporary, just until her brother found a job. I said it was fine. The house had the space. I liked the idea of being part of a real family again, even if it wasn't the family I'd started. Living with Apinya's mother and brother was harder than I'd expected. The cultural differences were more obvious with 3 Thai people in the house versus just Apinya. They spoke Thai to each other constantly. I couldn't understand anything they were saying. Sometimes they'd be talking and laughing, and I'd ask what was funny. Apinya would give me a brief English summary, but it never captured whatever had made them laugh. I started feeling like a guest in my own house, an outsider. They'd eat Thai food for every meal. I'd eat with them sometimes, but my stomach couldn't handle the spice levels they preferred. I started eating separately more often than not. Just simple Western food I'd make for myself while they ate together in Thai style, sharing dishes and talking in rapid Thai I couldn't follow. In November 2020, Apinya said we needed to talk about finances. She'd been managing our household expenses since we got married, and she'd noticed we were spending more than we were bringing in. My pension of $4,200 per month sounded like a lot, but when you converted it to baht and factored in supporting her mother and brother, covering all the utilities and food and maintenance on the house, it wasn't stretching as far as she'd hoped. She suggested I give her power of attorney over my Thai bank account. That way, she could manage the money more efficiently. She could pay bills directly without having to ask me to transfer money every time something came up. She could move money between accounts to take advantage of better interest rates. She understood the Thai banking system better than I did. It would just be easier if she had direct access to handle things. I hesitated. Giving someone else power of attorney felt significant. like I was giving up control. She said she understood my concern, but we were married, we were partners. She already managed all the household finances. This would just formalize what she was already doing. Plus, she said, what if something happened to me? If I had a medical emergency or an accident, she'd need to be able to access funds quickly to pay for treatment. Foreigners died in Thailand all the time from heart attacks or strokes or motorcycle accidents. It was just practical to have contingency plans. She was right. I was 71. My health was decent for my age, but I wasn't invincible. If something happened to me, Apinya should be able to access our money to handle the situation. I signed the power of attorney documents at the bank in December 2020. The bank officer explained in English what I was signing. I was giving Apinya full authority to access my Thai bank account, make withdrawals, make transfers, basically do anything I could do. Did I understand? Yes, I understood. She was my wife. Of course I trusted her with access to our money. The first few months after signing the power of attorney, nothing changed noticeably. Money still appeared in the account for my pension. Money still disappeared to pay for household expenses. I didn't monitor it closely. Apinya said everything was fine, and I believed her. I was retired. I didn't want to spend my retirement obsessing over bank statements. I wanted to enjoy life, trust my wife, be present in my marriage the way I hadn't been in my previous ones. But I started noticing small things. Apinya had a new phone, expensive model. She said her old one had broken and she'd needed a replacement. Her brother got a new motorcycle, bigger, nicer than his previous one. Apinya said he'd gotten a job and had bought it with his earnings, though I never saw him go to work. Her mother started wearing new jewelry, gold necklaces, gold bracelets. Apinya said they were gifts from relatives. I didn't question it. Thai culture was big on gold jewelry. It was normal. In March 2021, my daughter Rachel called me from Oregon. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She said she'd tried to send me a birthday card, but it had been returned as undeliverable. Did I have a new address? I told her I was living in Thailand now. I'd gotten married. I was happy. There was a long pause. She said she'd had no idea I'd left the country. No idea I'd gotten married. Why hadn't I told her? I didn't have a good answer. We'd been distant for so long. I hadn't thought she'd care. She said of course she cared. I was her father. She wanted me to be happy, but this seemed sudden. Who was this woman I'd married? How long had I known her? I got defensive. I told Rachel she didn't know anything about my life or my relationship. She'd made it clear years ago that she didn't want me in her life. Now suddenly she was concerned? Rachel said that wasn't fair. She'd been hurt by how absent I'd been during her childhood, but she'd never said she didn't want me in her life. She said she was worried about me. Older American men marrying younger Thai women they'd just met was a pattern with well-documented outcomes, and none of them were good. I hung up on her. I told Apinya about the conversation. Apinya said my daughter sounded jealous. Jealous that I'd found happiness with someone new. Jealous that I'd moved on with my life, instead of sitting around waiting for my kids to decide they wanted a relationship with me. She said my daughter was probably also worried about her inheritance. That's what it always came down to with adult children. They didn't care about your happiness. They just wanted to make sure you didn't spend their inheritance on a new wife. That interpretation made sense to me at the time. Rachel had never shown much interest in my life until I mentioned I'd gotten married. Now suddenly she was calling, expressing concern, asking questions. It did seem like it might be about money rather than genuine care. I felt justified in being angry with her. I felt justified in not calling her back when she tried to reach me again over the following weeks. In May 2021, I needed to renew my visa again. I went to immigration with Apinya. The officer asked for proof of funds. I needed to show 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account, or equivalent proof of monthly income. I gave him my bank statement. He looked at it, looked at me, looked at Apinya, then asked to speak with me privately. Apinya said whatever he needed to say, he could say in front of her. She was my wife. We had no secrets. The officer insisted. I followed him to a small office away from the main desk. He asked me, in a quiet voice, whether I knew how much money was in my Thai bank account. I said I assumed it was around $200,000, maybe a bit less after a year of living expenses. He showed me the statement. The account had 47,000 baht, about $1,500. Everything else was gone. I stared at the number. It didn't make sense. There had to be a mistake, some kind of banking error. The officer asked if I'd authorized any large transfers recently. I said no. He asked if anyone else had access to the account. I said my wife did. I'd given her power of attorney to manage household finances. He nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something he'd already suspected. He said I should speak with my wife about where the money had gone. He couldn't approve my visa extension without proof of adequate funds. I walked back out to where Apinya was waiting. I asked her where the money was. She looked confused. What money? The money in our bank account. There was supposed to be over $200,000 in the account. Now there was less than $2,000. Where did it go? She said she didn't understand what I was talking about. She hadn't touched the account except to pay our normal expenses. There must be some mistake. Maybe I was looking at the wrong account. We left the immigration office. I was shaking, not from anger yet, from confusion and fear. We went straight to the bank. I asked for a complete transaction history on my account for the past 6 months. The bank officer printed out a thick stack of papers. I sat in the lobby and started reading through them. Transfer after transfer, 200,000 baht, 300,000 baht, 150,000 baht, 275,000 baht, dozens of transfers, all to an account I didn't recognize, all initiated by Apinya using the power of attorney I'd given her. I asked her what these transfers were. She was sitting next to me, looking at the same papers. She said those were payments to her family, for the land, for her mother's medical expenses, for her brother's business he was starting. I said these transfers added up to millions of baht. How could her family need millions of baht? She said I didn't understand how expensive things were in Thailand. I didn't understand what it cost to take care of a family. She'd been managing our money the best she could, making sure everyone was taken care of. I asked to see receipts, documentation of what the money had been spent on. She said she didn't have receipts. Her family didn't keep records like that. Thai families didn't work that way. It was all based on trust. I said I needed something. Bank statements from her family's accounts showing where the money went. She said that was insulting. I was accusing her of stealing from me. She was my wife. Everything she'd done was for our family. How dare I question her like she was some kind of criminal? We drove home in silence. My mind was racing. Over $180,000 was missing from my account. My visa couldn't be renewed without proof of funds. I was stuck in Thailand, married to someone I was beginning to realize I didn't know at all, and I had no clear path forward. I called my bank in the United States to check my retirement account balance. The automated system told me my account balance was $147,000. It should have been over $500,000. I requested to speak with a representative immediately. The representative confirmed that there had been multiple large transfers from my retirement account to my Thai bank account over the past year. I'd initiated them, she said, or someone with my account access had initiated them. The transfers were all legitimate according to their records. I'd transferred a total of $415,000 from my retirement account to my Thai bank account between December 2020 and April 2021. Most of that money had been transferred in the past 6 months. I didn't remember authorizing transfers that large. I'd transferred the initial $200,000 for the house, but $415,000? When had I authorized the rest? I logged into my online banking. I found the transfer authorizations in my email. They had my email address. They had my password. Someone had been logging into my account and initiating transfers, and I'd been too trusting or too oblivious to notice. I confronted Apinya again. She'd had access to my laptop. She'd seen me log into my banking before. She could have written down my passwords. She denied it at first, said I was being paranoid, said I was probably confused because of my age. That made me angry in a way I hadn't felt before. I wasn't confused. I wasn't senile. I could read a bank statement. She'd stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from me and transferred it to accounts I'd never seen. I demanded to know where the money was. She started crying. She said she'd sent the money to her family because they were in trouble. Real trouble. Her brother had gotten involved with people he shouldn't have. Gambling debts. The kind where people get hurt if they don't pay. Her mother was going to lose the family land. Her sister needed money for her children's education. Everything she'd done to protect her family. She'd done it for us. If her family was secure, then we could be secure. That's how Thai families worked. I was supposed to understand that. I asked her how much money her family still had. Could we get any of it back? She said it was all gone. Her brother's debts had been paid. Her mother's land was safe. Her sister's children were in school. The money had been spent on the things it was meant to be spent on. There was nothing to get back. I asked about the account the transfers had gone to. Whose account was it? She said it was a family account, managed by her brother. I said I wanted to see statements from that account. She said her brother wouldn't share those with her. It was his account, his business. I realized then that I was never going to see any of that money again. It was gone, all of it. Everything I'd saved over 37 years of mail delivery. Everything I'd planned to live on for the rest of my life. Gone to pay for problems I couldn't verify with people I'd never met. And I'd enabled it by trusting my wife with power of attorney. By not monitoring my accounts. By being so desperate for companionship and validation that I'd ignored every warning sign. I contacted a lawyer in Hua Hin, an American expat who'd been practicing in Thailand for 20 years. I showed him everything. The power of attorney documents, the bank statements, the transfer records. He listened patiently, then delivered the news I already knew was coming. The money was gone. Legally, Apinya had done nothing wrong. I'd given her power of attorney. I'd authorized her to access my accounts. The fact that I regretted it now didn't constitute fraud. The house was in her name because I couldn't own land as a foreigner. She could do whatever she wanted with it, including selling it or mortgaging it without my permission. I had no legal recourse under Thai law. Could I go to the police? The lawyer said I could file a report, but it wouldn't lead anywhere. This was a civil matter, not a criminal one. The police wouldn't get involved in a domestic dispute over money between a husband and wife, especially when all the transfers appeared to have been authorized. Could I divorce her and try to get a settlement? The lawyer said I could try, but Thai divorce law heavily favored Thai nationals, especially in cases involving property. I'd likely end up with nothing. My best option was to leave Thailand, go back to the United States, and try to rebuild my life with whatever I had left. I had $147,000 left in my U.S. retirement account. My house in Carson City had been sold while I was in Thailand. I'd sold it in early 2021 because I thought I was staying in Thailand permanently. I'd transferred that money, about $175,000 after the sale, into my retirement account, which meant I'd subsequently transferred most of it to Thailand, to accounts I couldn't access anymore, for a house I didn't own, for a family that wasn't mine, for a wife who'd systematically emptied my accounts while I smiled and nodded and told myself I was taking care of my family. I moved out of the house in June 2021. Apinya didn't try to stop me. Her mother and brother were still living there. She said I was welcome to stay if I wanted to work things out, but she wasn't going to apologize for taking care of her family. That was her duty. If I didn't understand that, then maybe I didn't understand Thai culture as well as I thought I did. I rented a small studio apartment near the beach. $8,000 baht per month, about $250. I had enough money left to live modestly for maybe 10 years if I was careful, but I couldn't stay in Thailand without a visa, and I couldn't get a visa without proof of funds I no longer had. I flew back to the United States in August 2021. I had nowhere to go. My house was sold. My kids hadn't spoken to me in over a year. I ended up staying with an old coworker from the Postal Service for a few weeks while I figured out what to do. He asked what had happened. I told him everything. He didn't say, "I told you so," but I could see it in his face. He'd probably heard stories like mine before. Older guys going to Thailand, falling for younger women, losing everything. I was a cliché. I found an apartment in Reno. Small, 1 bedroom, $900 per month, plus utilities. I couldn't afford to live without working, so I started applying for jobs. Who wants to hire a 73-year-old? Retail stores said I was overqualified. Restaurants said I didn't have relevant experience. I finally got hired at the Walmart distribution center doing overnight stocking. Night shifts pay an extra $1 per hour. I work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. It's physically brutal. My back hurts. My knees hurt. But it pays the bills. I calculated my total losses one night sitting in my apartment with a calculator and a bottle of cheap whiskey. House purchase, $200,000. Additional transfers to Thai bank account, $215,000. Lost equity from selling my Carson City house and transferring the proceeds, $175,000. Miscellaneous expenses, lawyer fees, flights, $15,000. Total, $605,000, plus the additional $125,000 that's still sitting in my U.S. retirement account, but that I'll have to live on for the next 10, 15, 20 years if I'm unlucky enough to live that long. So effectively, I lost about $730,000 when you factor in the diminished retirement I'll have compared to what I planned for. I filed for divorce from Apinya through an international lawyer. She didn't contest it. The divorce was finalized in December 2021. She kept the house. I kept what was left of my retirement account. We have no contact. I've heard from other expats in Hua Hin that she's living with someone new, an Australian man, older than me. I wonder if he knows how his story is going to end. I wonder if he'd listen if I tried to warn him. Probably not. I wouldn't have listened either. My daughter Rachel reached out to me in January 2022. She'd heard from my ex-coworker that I was back in the States and working at Walmart. She wanted to see me. She wanted to talk. We met for coffee in Portland when I drove up there on my week off. It was awkward at first. Years of distance don't disappear over coffee, but she listened to the whole story. She didn't judge me, at least not out loud. She said she was sorry for what had happened. She said she wished I'd listened when she'd expressed concern. I said I wished I had too. We're trying to rebuild our relationship. She calls me once a week now. We talk about normal things. Her job, her kids, my grandchildren who I barely know, the weather. Sometimes we talk about Thailand. She asks if I regret going. I don't know how to answer that honestly. I regret the outcome. I regret losing my money. I regret trusting someone I shouldn't have trusted. But do I regret trying to find happiness? Trying to build a different life? I don't know. Maybe I do. Maybe the whole thing was a fantasy from the start and I was just too lonely and too stupid to see it. The lessons I've learned are obvious enough that I feel ridiculous writing them out. Don't give someone power of attorney unless you're absolutely certain you can trust them. And even then, monitor your accounts. Don't buy property in someone else's name, no matter what the legal situation requires. Don't assume that because someone is kind to you, they have your best interests at heart. Don't confuse gratitude with love. Don't ignore warnings from people who care about you just because those warnings are uncomfortable to hear. Don't think you're immune to scams just because you're smart or experienced or careful. Everyone thinks they're immune until they're not. I think about Apinya sometimes. I wonder if she planned the whole thing from the start, from that first conversation at the hotel reception desk, or if it evolved organically, opportunistically, as she realized how willing I was to help her family, how desperate I was for connection. I'll never know. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I'm 73 years old and I'm working night shifts at a warehouse because I gave away my retirement to a woman who saw me as a resource rather than a partner. I'll probably be working until I physically can't anymore. I'll probably die with almost nothing, in debt, alone. That's the reality I've created for myself through a series of decisions that all seemed reasonable at the time. If you're reading this and you're thinking about retiring to Thailand, about marrying someone you've just met, about giving someone access to your money because you're in love and you trust them, please consider my story. Consider that you might be wrong about everything you think you know. Consider that the person you're trusting might not be who you think they are. Consider that your loneliness might be making you vulnerable in ways you can't see clearly until it's too late. I'm not saying don't go to Thailand. I'm not saying all Thai women are scammers. I'm saying be careful, protect yourself. Don't give away your financial security for the promise of companionship. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. And for God's sake, don't give anyone power of attorney over your life savings, no matter how much you think you love them. I made those mistakes. I'm living with the consequences. You don't have to.